Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And welcome into another episode of the Damn Podcast here on the 24/7 Sports Podcast Network and powered by BeaverBlitz.com. I'm your host, Carter Bahns, joined as always by BeaverBlitz.com publisher Angie Machado, and today by Duck Territory beat writer Erik Skopil, who is here to help us preview the biggest matchup between the Beavers and Ducks in probably a decade, number 126. Coming up at Reser Stadium Saturday afternoon at 12:30. Game will be on ABC. We're going to let Erik take us through the Oregon program a little bit, give us some insight on the Ducks. We'll let him bounce, and then Angie and I will cover all of the news from Corvallis this week, provide our keys to the game, and then, as always, take a look around the Pac-12. And let's start with Angie, who has been busy behind the scenes working on our 75% off Black Friday promo. Angie, let's let you promote that here before we get going.
Yeah, it's huge. And this is for, if we have any Duck listeners too, this is Duck Territory. This is the entire 24/7 network. 75% off through Cyber Monday, but they started it early, so you can take advantage of it now and get ready for the game. 75% off. It works out to $26.85 for the entire year. Best sale that we do, the best promotion we do all year. Definitely time to jump on, especially with Civil War. I still call it Civil War, Erik. I'm sorry, just the way it is. With Civil War week here, Oregon week, definitely time to get on. Recruiting, I've also been working behind the scenes with recruiting. Oregon State had a commitment on Monday out of Texas. I expect a couple more coming in the next couple of weeks before signing day. So it's a perfect time to jump on.
And they're running the same promo over at Duck Territory as part of the 24/7 Sports Network. So Erik certainly working behind the scenes on that on their end. Erik, first of all, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate the time and the insight for sure. Let's start with you just letting the listeners know who you are, what you do at Duck Territory, how long you've been covering the program, and some of the content that you produce over on the Duck side of 24/7.
Yeah, this is, I think, season 6 for me at this iteration of working for Duck Territory. I actually worked at eDuck, which was part of the Scout Network. I don't know if you know that, Angie, or not. Prior to that, in 2015, I think it was, when I was working there, took a little break, came back, and I've been doing this for a while with Matt Freeman. I are 2 of 3 full-time contributors on the site, along with Jared Mack, who we just brought in about a year and a half ago. So we got three-headed monster. We got 3 full-time employees. We're at pretty much everything. We split up the basketball duties, but football, we are all on board. In fact, we have probably more people covering every day-to-day thing for Oregon sports than anybody else out there. And I think we're really proud of the coverage we put together. So yeah, we've got our own podcast, Odds and Audibles. Carter was on that with Matt and I earlier today. You can check that out if you'd like to hear kind of our Q&A. Obviously, Oregon State fans have a pretty good feel for, I'm sure, some of the things we talked about from Carter already, but that was a fun conversation, and we'll, of course, have a lot more things up on the site this week, previewing this matchup and a lot of opportunities, hopefully, afterwards to catch up too.
Yeah, I mean, you guys do an amazing job, and we've had people on from the 24/7 family for years. So I didn't know you were with eDuck though before. So yeah, I've been doing this since 2006. It's been a long time. I was with Rivals and then Scout for like a little month, and then jumped on over. But just such a wealth of knowledge. So Beaver fans, you are really getting the best of the best. And Carter, we know what it's like to kind of be the people putting out the most content.
We pride ourselves on that in Corvallis as well, for sure. So I can definitely vouch for the work that Erik and Matt and the rest of the team over there at Duck Territory do. I'm always checking out their work to get the latest on, quote unquote, those guys down the road.
Yeah, those guys is what the Oregon State Beavers refer to them as.
Fair enough.
So let's dive into Oregon here while we have Erik with us here on the Damn Podcast and kind of pick his brain on the Ducks and that team that's going to be coming up to Corvallis, making the 45-minute drive north up I-5 or 99 or whichever route they take. Saturday afternoon. And I think we have to start at the quarterback position. That has been one of the most notable storylines of the last few weeks for Oregon is the health of Bo Nix, who clearly was not 100% against Utah. You could see that the offense was not firing on all cylinders like it has been for most of the year, an offense that's averaging over 40 points per game. You heard from him, Tuesday, Monday? He said he was good to go. But how close to full strength do you reasonably expect that he could be?
I think that's the question. Last week it was, would he be available? Now it's, what can he offer? And I think you saw a week ago, a lot of the passing stuff was still there. I mean, I was impressed with a couple of the rollouts and the throws he made downfield, a couple of passes that traveled through the air pretty far. I think I was uncertain if the vertical passing game, which has been a staple this year, would continue to be something he was capable of, I guess, consistently hitting on. And we'll see what that looks like this week as well. But the big thing with Bo a week ago was, he's been such a dynamic dual threat quarterback, and the running was taken completely out of the game. That was both out of designed runs. I don't think they really ran a lot of RPOs, or if they did, there was no run option, or at least keep option for the quarterback. And then in terms of scrambling, I think one of the things, Oregon is one of the better offensive lines in terms of limiting sacks. I think the number is now 2 or 3 on the season. I forget, that they've allowed all year, which is pretty remarkable. And that's been in part due to really good offensive line play. Veteran guys that have been together. Adrian Clem's coming from the Pittsburgh Steelers to be the offensive line coach, kind of instilled some new technical stuff. But another big part has been Bo, and how, I think, adept he is in the pocket of moving around and making people miss and deciding when to take off. And that part was gone as well. And so it was a much more one-dimensional Oregon offense than it's been in previous weeks. And that's in part why the game was really low scoring, and why Oregon's defense was the one that kind of was able to kind of finish things off, when an offense that all season has really kind of saved the bacon wasn't able to do that for the majority of that game. They got off to a pretty good start, strong first half, but second half, Utah made some adjustments, kind of recognized Nix isn't going to keep it, and Oregon couldn't run the football. They threw the ball okay downfield, but really were only able to kick the one field goal, and ultimately that ended up being enough. But you just kind of wonder where Bo's at this week with another week of rest. But I don't think anyone expects that injury to be close to 100% coming into this one.
So assuming he can't give you everything you normally expect to get out of Bo Nix this weekend, I mean, how much does that hold Oregon back? Because you think of that scheme as being heavy with the RPO, heavy with the quarterback run. I mean, this is a quarterback who's run for 14 touchdowns this year, and then he only ran it once against Utah. It was a big one to kind of ice the game there. But the ground game is a huge part of Bo Nix's game, and a huge part of what makes that offense move so effectively. So if he can't provide that, I mean, how detrimental could that be for the Ducks offense going up against a defense that's been pretty solid year round?
This is a team where Oregon has been able to win kind of pretty with just scoring a lot of points, let the defense kind of manage itself. And, if they give up 2 or 3 touchdowns, that's probably going to be okay, because the offense can do its part and get you close to 30 to 40 points every week. They don't have that luxury anymore. And that's what we saw against Utah last week, of they had to win kind of ugly. And that's what'll have to happen, I think, on Saturday against Oregon State. Because I don't expect Bo to be quite the player he's been previously, like I said. And that takes a big component of the run game out. I mean, Oregon had been, I believe, going into last week, the conference's top rush offense, and averaging about 240 yards per game. And they ended up with 56 or 59, I think it was. And 56 came in the first half before Utah made some adjustments. So Oregon in the second half basically couldn't run the football. And that is a pretty alarming trend, because this has been an offense this year that has been run first to set up a lot of the vertical passes. And I'm not sure really what you can expect to get out of Bo as a runner. And as you said, that has a pretty big impact in terms of the offense. So I do think there is enough there to move the ball down the field passing. Bo's been pretty competent all year there, and made some really good decisions, even when maybe there hasn't been a lot there in terms of checking it down and throwing it away. But I don't expect this offense to be anywhere near where it was earlier on in this season, where Bo was able to run for 60, 80 yards per game and get in the end zone a couple of times. That component, I think, is pretty much off the table unless he's healed up has really improved his health, which I don't believe is where things are at right now.
Which is interesting. I mean, does it concern you at all? Because Oregon State's strength is their secondary. Yeah. So, Oregon State is not good containing mobile quarterbacks, or they have struggled in the past, giving up some big chunk runs. But Oregon State strength is that secondary.
No, I think that's why I said it has to be low scoring, I think, for this game for Oregon, because, I don't know exactly where the offense comes from to a certain degree. Oregon has some talent out at receiver that has been able to win one-on-one matchups, and I think you hope that you can get those victories again on Saturday. But they're going to have to get creative in the run game, and they tried a couple things last game that just didn't work. I mean, one of them was the first snap of the second half, bringing in Ty Thompson for, I don't really know what that was. Dan has been pretty tight-lipped about what that was and didn't really give a lot of explanation. And then they tried running out of the Wildcat twice, and those plays just didn't work at all. So, the run game to me, which again has been such a reliable part of this offense all year, is suddenly really unreliable. And that makes this offense, to a certain degree, pretty unreliable. They have a really good kicker. I know Carter was on our podcast and talking about lamenting some of the concerns for Oregon State. If this becomes a field goal competition, I think Oregon feels pretty good because Camden Lewis has been really consistent. And maybe this is a game where you take more field goals because you're having a hard time getting down the field if you can. So no, I think there certainly are concerns offensively, which is a weird place to be considering all season it's been, okay, the offense is going to be able to move the ball. Can the defense just do enough to keep the other team from going for a 40 or 50?
But that's what's so interesting, because Oregon State has had such a crappy defense for so many years that we are now actually kind of in the same boat. Like, can our offense do any? I mean, the defense will keep them in it. Can the offense score enough points? I mean, it's a strange place to be for Oregon State too.
Yeah. And Oregon's defense played a little better. Sorry to cut you off. Oregon's defense played a little better last week. We'll see if that trend continues or if that was kind of a one-off.
Yeah, I want to go back to that run game in particular, because that really, it's been the strength of both teams. It's their ability to run the ball offensively, but then defensively to take it away from the other team. So, you kind of see these two teams clash there at the point of attack. Oregon's offensive line, one of the best in the country. I believe, are they down to semifinalists or finalists for the Joe Moore Award? I know they're on that list.
Thought it was semifinalists that just came out.
Obviously the pass blocking numbers are there too, only giving up 3 sacks to this point in the year. So, I mean, even with the injuries on that offensive line at Oregon, do you feel like this still is kind of one of those games that gets determined at the point of attack? And if so, how much of an advantage does Oregon have there offensively in particular?
Yeah, and some of this will be dependent on health, because it's not just Nix that's dealing with an injury. Alex Forsyth, the team's starting center, didn't play last week, and I think that had an impact on the lack of run game success, some of the issues that they had up front. And honestly, they were pretty good on pass situations. Like, I was really impressed with, Utah's very much aware of what Bo's situation was. He wasn't really impacted more than a couple of times all game. He had the 1 sack, and then he had, I think, a third down where he had to throw it away and they settled for a field goal. But for the most part, they kept him pretty upright, and that was pretty impressive considering they were playing a couple backups. We don't know what Forsyth's status will be. Jackson Powers Johnson was a player who got a start last game at right guard, but he left pretty early. And Ryan Walk, who had been the right guard, was starting at center. Now, there's probably some jockeying of stuff here. And then the other component that's actually the good news for Oregon is Stephen Jones, who was the day 1 starter at right guard, just returned for the Utah game after missing about 10 weeks with a foot injury. So they are getting healthier, but there's also players out of the lineup. So there's a little bit of uncertainty about exactly who's available in this one. I would imagine whatever they put out there will be fairly close to what they've been most of the season. I don't know exactly where Forsyth and Powers Johnson are at, but yeah, that could be an advantage for Oregon. And certainly I think Forsyth is one of the more valuable offensive players on this team. He's a 3rd-year starter at center, really smart player. He and Nix, I think, do a lot of the pre-snap determinations of checking and getting into certain protections and getting out of certain plays. And not having Forsyth last week, maybe you could say, impacted some of the runs that they were in, maybe some of the run fits. They weren't maybe exactly what they were supposed to be, in part because they had a second center in there who isn't as confident maybe in some of the decisions pre-snap. But No, I think Oregon will absolutely want to run the football, and they'll need to run the football to be successful in this game. I think it was kind of, I talk about how much sure what the Oregon defense is. Was that a one-off with Utah? I don't know if you can expect Oregon to win a football game running for less than 60 yards. I think that's just kind of a tough place to put yourself in.
So Oregon like we talked about, the offense has been so explosive. They've scored over 40 points in every game except Georgia, Washington, and Utah. If Oregon State is going to slow them, they might be a little slow just with injuries and whatnot, but what is Oregon State's best shot to slowing them down?
Yeah, I think the big part is the run stuff we're talking about here. I think it's maybe you think, okay, well, Oregon was able to throw the football against Utah, and really it was pretty remarkable, a lot of the success they had. Well, Oregon State, that should be another plus opportunity. I don't think that's the case at all with what Oregon State has in the back end. I think it's going to be one of the tougher secondaries Oregon has faced all season. So for Oregon State, I think it's a matter of, okay, if you can win on first and second down against an Oregon run attack, which doesn't feel like it's what it's been all season, and then force Oregon to have to win on third down throwing, which is a place Oregon's been pretty comfortable. Bo Nix has been very adept in those situations all season. But if you can win a fair number of those downs, you can slow this team down. And the punting, I mentioned how good the Oregon place kicker is. The punting is a mess. They've had 4 different guys that tried to punt this season. Bo Nix is the 5th. They've had 5 different people punt the ball this year.
Oregon State has a good punter.
There we go. So yeah, the special teams thing, it's split. But my point being though, like if you do end up getting 3 and outs or forcing Oregon to punt, it's not like Oregon's going to flip the game with its punting. I think the run game is crucial, and I think with not knowing how much Bo can really do as a runner, I imagine early on Oregon State just really kind of takes away the running back and forces Bo to, hey, if you can carry it, go for it. If not, get creative, because that part of the game was exactly what Utah did in the second half, and it was kind of lights out from a run perspective.
Yeah. So while we're on the run game, let's move to the defensive side for Oregon, because obviously Oregon State also has a pretty potent rushing attack led by Damian Martinez, who has now run for over 100 yards in 5 straight games. Probably one of the best running backs Oregon has faced this year. And again, it's a good Oregon run defense. The numbers are there. I believe it's top 20 in the nation in stopping the run at 112.5 rushing yards allowed per game. Then I look at, I was looking at the stats at maybe some comparable guys to Martinez who the Ducks have faced. Zach Charbonnet at UCLA racked up 151 on 7.6 yards per carry and a touchdown against Oregon. And I feel like, if Oregon State can get that from Martinez in this game, it's going to be pretty happy with the production it got from the running game. So I guess just how much do you expect Oregon's run defense to mitigate what Oregon State does in the ground game this weekend?
Really impressed with what they did up front last week against Utah. Utah finished with, I think, 150 or something around there. A fair amount of that was rising scrambles near the end of the game. They were really successful in short yardage situations. They had a couple of spots where Utah was trying to push it to extend drives, but was stood up and they had to kick field goals, or I think the second time go for it on 4th, and they failed. So the Oregon defensive front has been all season probably the strength of the defense. The linebacker play has been very up and down. And I think for this defense, to me, like the more I'm kind of rewatching some of these games, I think a lot of this is matchup dependent. Like I think the Washington matchup was just a disaster for this Oregon defense, which doesn't have a lot of speed at safety and really only have Christian Gonzalez is an excellent cover corner. Triquez Bridges, the other corner, was a guy they wanted to play at safety, but nobody else was really capable enough to play at corner. So he's basically playing out of position this year. And he's fine in terms of if you're playing like soft zone coverage, he'll make the play, but he gives up quite a bit that way. And I just don't know if they have the personnel to match up with the Washington, which is going to stretch you down the field, has all this speed on the outside and a really competent quarterback. That was a really tough matchup for Oregon. Utah, which I think is probably more comparable to Oregon State than Washington, is probably a matchup Oregon defensively is more comfortable playing in, where it is going to be a lot of stuff in the front 7. And when they do take shots downfield, it seems like it's a little bit more inconsistent in terms of connecting than what we saw against Washington. So I'll be curious. I think that is a more favorable matchup for sure than what Washington was, which just going in, everybody was kind of like, boy, like this could be a problem. And then it was worst case scenario. It was more than a problem. It was a disaster, especially in the fourth quarter where they gave up 2 60-yard touchdowns to drop the game. I think for Oregon, a lot of it will come down to linebacker play. Noah Sewell's been playing a lot better recently. Justin Flo doesn't play a lot, but when he does, he's pretty productive. But to me, it comes down to Jeffrey Bassa, who's their second starting linebacker.
I'm laughing because the Georgia game, the announcers were going on and on about Justin Flo as this is one of the best linebackers in the country, folks.
Yeah.
It was actually comedy.
And he just doesn't play very much. He plays like 5 snaps per game, like genuinely doesn't play a whole lot. And Jeffrey Bassa, who starts, is really, I think, a pretty ineffective player. He's a converted defensive back playing linebacker. So Oregon's got some guys like playing out of position, which is where you might have concerns. But no, I think the run game will be, as we said earlier, be pretty telling. And if one team has a ton of success running, I think that team's probably going to win the game.
I think it'll be tough. I just look at the matchups. We've talked a lot about kind of special teams. Oregon State maybe wins the punting advantage. Mm-hmm. Oregon wins the kicking advantage. Kicking wins points, though. How is Oregon's return coverage? Because Oregon State has returned a couple kicks and punts to the house.
It's not fantastic. They brought in Joe Lorg, who was the Penn State special teams coach. And if you go look at the stats at Penn State, it was like pretty remarkable. Like they were really terrible before he arrived. And then his 2 or 3 seasons there, they were like top 5 in kick and punt return coverage. Not been very good this year. And I think part of that has been just not consistent punting. Like if the punter isn't putting the ball downfield very far or to the right spot, it's hard to get your return coverage units in the right places to finish the play. Haven't been beaten for a touchdown all year. They've had a couple long ones, but it just hasn't consistently been a strength. I don't think it's been a massive weakness, but they have some speed on this team. I would say for an Oregon team, though, they're still trying to get back to be like Mario Cristobal when he was here. It was all strength, brute force, and they really lost a lot of the speed that was kind of such a defining characteristic for Oregon for so many years. I think this year's team has a speed coach. They have a coach whose job is to work purely on speed and agility and all that. I think they're going to get there from a speed perspective, but this still isn't like a super fast team in general. They've got some guys, but like across the board, it's not what they were 6 to 8 years ago.
Potential matchup, I suppose, for Oregon State to potentially exploit if Anthony Gould is back in the lineup and returning punts for the Beavers. Of course, he missed the Arizona State game with an injury. One more matchup I want to highlight before we move on to a couple of coaching questions is that defensive backfield that you talked about for Oregon. Christian Gonzalez being a solid coverage corner, but it doesn't seem like outside of that much has gone Oregon's way in defending the pass. They're averaging 279 passing yards per game. They're giving up conversions on third down at a 49% rate. But going up against an Oregon State offense, which hasn't really had much of a consistent or efficient passing game since Ben Gulbranson took over at quarterback, you feel like maybe Oregon's weaknesses on the back end could be mitigated by that? Or do you think it's an opportunity for Oregon State to take a step forward there?
Well, I'll just ask it back to you. Like, what's this? You said Anthony Gould. I know. I watched him a little bit in high school. I know he's got some wheels. I know Trayshawn's got some wheels. Like, is there speed there to consistently stretch the field? And how has Gulbranson been at hitting those passes? Because if there's a level of competency, there should be plays available over the course of a game, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think speed is Oregon State's biggest weapon in the passing game. I think it's just the consistency of getting the ball there and the struggles that Oregon State has had with drops. That's what makes the passing game so ineffective. But speed is absolutely no question.
Is there.
With
Silas
Harrison.
They're all small. But they're not going to win jump balls. They're small. They're fast. We saw a little bit against ASU where they actually did a little more of the slants, little dump offs, just to get the ball in guys' hands in space instead of going for deep balls. I think that's where Oregon State needs to be if they're going to have success, because going deep might be a little tougher.
Yeah, this is a defense that has kind of switched up its identity from a coverage perspective. Against Washington, it was a lot of soft zones, and then Washington still beat those for long plays. And so this last week, they played a lot more press, man coverage than they had recently. And I don't know if that was a lack of talent on the outside by Utah or what, but Utah really didn't have anything on the outside much of the day. And part of that was Dalton Kincaid is such a weapon at tight end that like Oregon couldn't take that away. And that was their all game. So they just kind of went after that matchup. He had like 11 catches. I think this is not a very good defensive backfield. Christian
If it makes
Gonzalez.
you-
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Oh no, I was gonna say if it makes you feel any better, Oregon State gave up the winning touchdown when they went soft zone against the Huskies too. So
Yeah. I watched that drive down in. I was in
Yeah.
Boulder for that. Yeah, I watched that drive. That was a disappointing outcome. No, like, but Oregon has one really good corner, and Christian Gonzalez, who I think is pound for pound one of the better defensive players in the conference, and is a playmaker. It's really hard to win battles to that side of the field wherever he's at. The rest of the guys in the secondary are kind of just like, they're not very good in coverage. Like Brian Addison is a really good coverage player, but he only plays on passing downs, and he's a safety, former wide receiver. He's like 6'5", covers a lot of space. He makes some plays. But Bennett Williams, who's one of the more talented overall players, has been a liability in coverage. He had a great bounce back game.
he had a great, against Utah. He had a couple good plays.
He had the 2 picks against Utah, which was great to see, because the week previous against Washington, he was the player in coverage on both the long touchdowns. So it's a give and a take with this secondary. They've got a lot of veteran guys, which is a good thing. A lot of experience back there. A lot of these guys are 4th, 5th, 6th-year players. But I just think aside from Gonzalez, I don't know how many like true NFL. Like, I think Bennett Williams could play if he was asked to play a position. I think he's playing. All these guys are playing out of position to me. Yeah. So like they have Bennett Williams playing kind of like a nickel position.
But he should be a safety.
He should be playing deeper, but they don't really have some. So it's just kind of all of this type of things. Like, I think Bennett could be an NFL safety. I don't know if he's going to be playing in the position he's in now. And Christian Gonzalez certainly can be an NFL player. I think he'll be drafted pretty high when he goes pro at the end of the year, is what the expectation is. But no, the concerns should be there from an Oregon perspective going into any matchup, basically, in terms of stopping the pass. I mean, Colorado had a 85-yard touchdown on this secondary. So yeah, it's not a strength.
Angie, do you want to lead us into the coaching questions here before we get Erik out?
Okay, yeah. So first of all, I just have to say everything I've seen from Dan Lanning is super impressive. I think from a Beaver, when you talk to Beaver fans, they all kind of liked when Mario was in place, because it was that easy guy to not like for your rival, but everybody likes Lanning. It's, he's kind of like Mark Helfrich. All Beaver fans are like, oh, he seems like a nice guy. 11 games in, what are your thoughts on the job he's done?
I find him to be, I just did a radio thing earlier today, and they're asking me kind of like, how did he win over the Oregon players and the fan base? And I think 2 things are very much the case here. He's extremely likable. He's a funny guy. He understands how to communicate with people. I think that's just a winning characteristic in almost any profession, but especially coaching, where it's so relational and in terms of obviously building relationships with his players is much more important than building relationships with media people. I don't think he really cares what we think of him to a certain degree, but he'll have some quips that are like, okay, you can see why people would like enjoy being around him. Like, I don't know if you saw his comment about Chris Hudson after the Utah game, but that's like one of those things that's like genuinely like, okay, good. He kind of understands it. He's got a good sense of humor. So that part I think wins over people just on like a early on basis of like, okay, early introductions, early perceptions of him. And then he's really smart. He's a really, really bright guy. You don't get to this position at 36 without being just top of the class football intellect. He's, I think, done a really good job of giving agency and kind of autonomy to his coordinators. I think at times that has bit him defensively, because I think if you ask anybody objectively, like, who's the best defensive mind on this coaching staff, it's Dan Lanning. But Tosh Lupoy has been the defensive play caller. There might have been a shift this last week where Lanning is taking on a little bit more ownership, and you'll notice the defense played a lot better. But he's let Kenny Dillingham, the offensive coordinator, just do his thing. And that was a real problem with the previous staff. Mario's hands were kind of in every container. He was really kind of an over micromanager type of leader, I think.
Authoritarian.
That you can say the word, yeah, sure.
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard.
And I don't think that's inaccurate. And I think Dan certainly will be very involved, but also wants to make sure that they have the understanding that, like, it's also their offense. And for Tosh Lupoy, that it is his defense with Dan Lanning assisting. So I think he's done a great job of doing that. Now the negatives are probably he's maybe been too aggressive at times, and that has at times been too. When it's worked, everybody has been like, that was brilliant, right? And that's just how football is. It's such a results-based sport and that's all sports, but like against UCLA, they go for the onside kick in the first half, they get it, they go score, they create a 3-score game. They go for it a couple times on fourth down, they get it, and that extends drives. All of this stuff, everybody's like, "Wow, this is incredible." Against Colorado, the first touchdown, they throw it to the left tackle eligible. They run it with a linebacker comes in, runs it in from a yard out. The running back throws a touchdown to the quarterback. All these fun trick plays, like, oh man, this is great. And then against Washington, when they try the onside kick and it doesn't work, and then they go for it in a couple spots and fourth down and they get turned away, it becomes second guessing. So, and even a little bit of that against Utah. Just they're very aggressive young staff. I think they are very confident in their ability and their players' ability to make these plays, but at times there's been, I don't want to say too much confidence, but just a little bit too much aggressiveness. And I think he said he's learned lessons from some of these mistakes, and I think that will ultimately add up. But that's been probably the biggest complaint from an Oregon fan base is just no. No, but that's been the biggest complaint. It's just sometimes they roll the dice too much and it hasn't worked. But I think you like coaches that are aggressive more than ones that aren't most of the time.
Yeah, Oregon State fans certainly familiar with aggressive play calling on third and fourth downs with Jonathan Smith. As Angie alluded to, it can be a little polarizing at times.
Mm-hmm. But you know what? I'm excited for this matchup because I do think Coach Smith and Coach Lanning are two of the brighter, younger minds in the head coaching ranks. And I'm excited to see the chess match because I do think Jonathan Smith is very strategic in what he's doing. Trent Bray, they're going to come. So the chess match that we're going to see is going to be fun to watch.
Especially since one of them's an offensive mind and the other's a defensive mind. I mean, I think that adds some intrigue to it for sure. One more for you, Erik, on Dan Lanning, and it has to do with him understanding and embracing the rivalry. And I know this was a big talking point when Oregon was playing Washington a couple of weeks ago. And from what I gathered, he was playing the UW fight song in practice and reached out to alumni to learn a little bit more. Have you sensed some of that with this rivalry too? I mean, obviously, I think as the years have gone on, we've seen that Oregon UW rivalry grow, and maybe Oregon State mean potentially a little bit less to some Oregon fans. But has Lanning kind of leaned into it? I know you said in our Q&A swap, which will be up at BeaverBlitz.com on Thursday, that he is a huge fan of rivalry games and totally embraces it. So I guess, have you seen any of that kind of manifest throughout the week so far?
Well, there was a guy with a chainsaw at practice, revving the chainsaw up during practice. So he is very clearly somebody who wants to try to push as many little buttons as possible. And he'll own up to the fact that, like, I'm not from this part of the country. I'm not going to understand the rivalry as well as my players, but this is an Oregon team that obviously a ton of players have played in this rivalry, and a lot of players that are local who are from Eugene and Portland. And I don't know if there's anybody who's from Corvallis off the top of my head, but there's certainly understanding among players and even some of the not the assistants on staff, but you go down the line, some of the GAs are former Oregon players. I think he's got a wealth of knowledge to pull from, but I just thought it was funny. They had a guy with an actual chainsaw at practice today, apparently, just revving that thing up, getting them ready. But I think he is somebody who is not a robot, right? And like sometimes, like I think one of the things that frustrated Oregon fans at times in the past was the faceless opponent kind of concept, which is fine. Like, I understand you want every game to be kind of seen similarly. You don't want to have ups and downs of a season, but Lanning has kind of said, like, that seems like you're kind of fighting against yourself there, where the players are going to care more about Washington or more about going against Oregon State than they're going to care about going against some other teams. And so why not lean into it? And that's what I've seen him done so far. And he has said, like, he loves rivalry weeks. Like, this is a thing, he gets him fired up. He gets excited about these opportunities. So yeah, no, I think, and I don't know exactly how Smith's approach has been to these kind of rivalry matchups, but
total opposite.
Like, yeah, Lanning leans in more than any coach I've been around at Oregon. Like, I don't remember much about Willie Taggart's time here because I was a blip on the radar, but like, Mario didn't really build up the rivalry stuff until
Chip was really not into it.
Chip was not into it, and Helfrich was, I think, milquetoast about most anything. I guess Mario built up the rivalry behind the scenes as some locker room videos after the Washington game a year ago came out. But in terms of media approach and all that stuff, it was not really a thing. So no, I think Lanning gets it.
I think the players are, yeah, see, Jonathan Smith is milquetoast too. I mean, he's played in 4 of them. You would think that he, I could see a couple. I mean, Trent Bray's probably talking it up a little bit, but yeah. Players are, I saw Damian Martinez with a questionable tweet today. Little locker room material.
An acronym, perhaps.
Yes, it was an FT and a little duck
F.
emoji, and then a video of him running the ball against ASU. I'm like, oh, Beaver fans loved it, but I'm like, ooh.
Of course they do.
Freshman. That's a freshman move right there.
Little bulletin board material, perhaps. Erik, one more for you, and then we'll let you get on your way and get an early start on your Thanksgiving here. But we just got to get your general thoughts on how you see this thing playing out. Obviously, a lot of matchups across the board that are intriguing. We talked all about the run game, Oregon State's potential ability to take advantage of Oregon's secondary. If there's maybe one matchup you see determining the outcome of this thing, what is it? How do you see the thing progressing? And then if you want to drop a score prediction, we'll let you put that on the record before you get out of here.
I still think a lot of this comes down to what Bo Nix can give you as a runner. I mean, I think if you take that component away, it really impacts this offense to a point where I think it's going to be probably fairly low scoring. I think it's probably asking too much for him to do a lot more than he did last week. The last thing you want is, at the end of this season is for him to suffer he had broke his ankle last year at Auburn. That's why his season ended there. And he broke his ankle in high school. The last thing you want is him to have a third broken ankle because you tried to have him do too much. And honestly, the fact that he's playing in these games to begin with what I understand is a pretty severe sprain, is impressive enough. So I don't expect he's really going to be able to do a lot more than he did last week. And so if the run game for Oregon is just kind of middle of the road and nothing special, and they can't break a player here or there, I think that's going to make it difficult for Oregon to move the ball with a ton of success. So I think this game might be one that comes down to the fourth quarter of whichever offense can finally kind of get something going, and maybe it's whichever offense protects the ball better. Turnovers might be significant here. They were last week. There were 6 turnovers in that Oregon-Utah game. That was a big part of why there was only 37 combined points scored. I think the over-under was like 70 going in, and obviously didn't get there. But I think this game could be very similar to the Oregon-Utah game of last week, and I'll probably be a homer and pick Oregon to win by a field goal, but I really could see this going either way. And genuinely, I think if either team gets over probably 35 points, that probably indicates it's lopsided one way or the other. I just don't really look at this matchup and say, like either team scores in the 20s, it's going to be pretty close. But I don't know. I find it hard to believe Oregon's going to score like 38 points unless it's the result of a bunch of turnovers or big plays that they hit that are unexpected. Just because I think there's a lot missing right now offensively.
Yeah, and Oregon State hasn't given up more than 17 points at home this season.
Right.
So yeah, it's going to be. I'm right there with you. I kind of go back and forth, but I think it's a field goal game.
There you have it. Erik Skopil of Duck Territory on the 24/7 Sports Network stopping by and dropping all sorts of knowledge on the Ducks. Erik, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll see you at the air quotes press box at Reser Stadium in about 72 hours.
Look forward to that. All right. See you guys. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Erik. That's Erik Skopil of Duck Territory on the 24/7 Sports Network. And Angie, just basically another advertisement for 24/7 Sports. And there's no better time to do it than right now with the 75% off deal that we've got running right now through Cyber Monday. Angie, tell the people about it.
75% off an annual membership to BeaverBlitz. It gets you a full year of all of our coverage, including JP's walk-off in the spring with baseball, with basketball coverage, recruiting, football, spring camp, fall camp, you name it. It's a full year coverage for $26.85. You will not beat it. And I promise you, we would love to have you in the lodge.
All right, we're going to turn our sights now to Corvallis and the week that was and that continues to be as we record this on Wednesday, November 23rd, a day before Thanksgiving. Angie, we talked to Jonathan Smith on Monday in his weekly press conference, got some updates on injuries and whatnot. And then yesterday, it was the offense's turn to talk Ducks, to talk the win over Arizona State and whatnot. And so let's highlight a few things that unfolded in Corvallis. And we have to start with the injuries, of course, because that list continues to grow for Oregon State as the season winds down. And another season ender with Malik Kelly, the tight end who played a little bit of fullback last week in Jack Colletto's stead, is out for the rest of the year with that injury that appears to be a knee injury, technically undisclosed. Jonathan Smith did not specify, but he is out for the year. In addition to Luke Musgrave at tight end, who Smith said is probably done for the year as well, and he ruled him out for Saturday. Said that he will likely not play in the bowl game as well. And lastly, Smith said that effectively said that Chance Nolan is probably done for the year, saying that he would be surprised if Ben Gulbranson wasn't the starter on Saturday and for the bowl game. So I feel like really no huge surprises there, but we did get a little bit more of a finite answer from Smith on a couple of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, we've said for a while, and the things that I had been hearing was that we would not be seeing Luke Musgrave in a Beaver uniform again. He's preparing for the NFL and kind of moving on to his next phase. Chance Nolan's an interesting one because, Carter, we have not seen him on the sideline even. I mean, I really hope this kid's okay because I mean, I've looked for him on the sidelines and I have not seen him. He's not, wearing the blue little penny to put in place. So hopefully he's okay. And hopefully we get to see him again at some point. And then as we kind of indicated on Sunday night, Smith was super just non-committal on everybody else. It was all day to day. So hopefully Oregon State gets a few more of those guys back. I know Tyler Marino, it was not a foot injury like I had heard. He was just sick. So hopefully he's back. And hopefully some of those other guys can make a return too. Guys like Jaden Grant, Alex Austin, Jack Coletto are going to be doing anything in their power to be playing in this game. Yeah,
Chance Nolan actually is not even practicing right now, Jonathan Smith said on Monday, which I think tells you all you need to know about his status. I mean, this injury occurred 2 months ago, and he still hasn't returned to full practice. And if that's the case now, it clearly is much more of a significant injury than we thought or were told at the time. So obviously we continue to send good thoughts Chance Nolan's way and hope that he can return to the football field at some point. But even if he does get healthy for that bowl game, it would be pretty tough to uproot Ben Gulbranson now, who continues to look better and better, get more and more comfortable in that QB1 role. So, I mean, like Jonathan said, I kind of doubt we see Chance even if he is healthy.
Yeah, I thought Ben is finally looking more comfortable in the pocket. What we saw down in Tempe, he's and it looks like the team is rallying around him as well. So it's fun to see him grow as well.
And it looks like the game's really slowing down for him too. I mean, the running plays he made where he didn't have what he wanted downfield and he decided to take off. I mean, that's not a play that Ben Gulbranson makes in his second or third start. That's more of a veteran type move and somebody who has seen some defenses firsthand. But back to the injury piece. So I'll give you a rundown on some of the guys who did not play last week who are still day to day. That includes Jack Coletto at the utility spot, Deshaun Fenwick and Jam Griffin at running back, Anthony Gould at wide receiver and punt returner, offensive lineman Henelli Bloomfield and Tyler Marano, and then defensive backs Alex Austin and Jaden Grant. Obviously starters all across, all across the board on both sides of the ball there, not playing. Jack Coletto, I did see on the sideline at Arizona State. So tells you perhaps he's, maybe a little closer than some of those other guys. But I mean, if you're Oregon State, you need at least one of Austin and Grant back to help slow down that Oregon passing game. You need Anthony Gould back because he gives you speed on the edge, which is key to beating Oregon, as Erik just told us. And then the offensive line too. I mean, you're going up against a strong defensive front. You hope to get Henelli Bloomfield back in there. So key injuries across the board. And again, we'll have to wait until game day to figure out who of those will return, if any.
Yeah. We were talking earlier in the season just how lucky Oregon State was with the injury bug. It kind of all crashed down then against when the Beavs were playing Cal and kind of continued last week. But looking at, there's not a team in the Pac-12 or across the country that is not dealing with similar. So, look at Oregon with offensive lineman down. Bo Nix is nicked up. It's kind of part of the game, but hopefully Oregon State gets a few of these guys back because they're such key cogs to the offense and defense.
Adding to the pageantry of Saturday's game at Reser Stadium, it's also Senior Day for Oregon State, as we see every other year in this matchup against Oregon. The seniors will be recognized before the game. That includes guys like Jaden Grant, Brandon Kipper, who Jonathan Smith shouted out on Monday when he was, he didn't give us a full list of who all's walking out, but he mentioned those two as being a couple who those could be emotional farewells. And I think it's a little more meaningful just because those guys have been here since Smith took over and they've seen the program at its low point. And, they're a key reason why the Beavers are still in contention for their third 10-win season in program history. I think it'll be hard to see some of those guys go for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, Carter, I mean, as media, you kind of get to know these players, and there's some Senior Day, some guys you feel a little lump in the throat when they take the field for the last time, just because they are special. And I would say, Jaden Grant is one, Brandon Kipper, definitely, because those guys, Jack Coletto. Well. I mean, those are guys that speak to us, and you build a rapport with these guys, and how much it means to them.
We're going to do our best to get that ceremony on video and put it up on the BeaverBlitz video YouTube. We've had a couple of people ask us to do so, and I said, the sight lines in the press box aren't very good. Field level is not the best to take in Senior Day. So we'll see what we can do and try to get that up on the channel, since they obviously will not show that on TV. But for all those loyal Oregon State fans that subscribe to us on YouTube at BeaverBlitz video, we'll try to get that up for you if we can get a good sight line on everything. Obviously, this being a rivalry game, the questions come up in the press conferences. Does this mean more? Blah, 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 all of this stuff. You're not going to get a reaction out of Jonathan Smith. No. You might from Dan Lanning, but certainly not from Smith, who said, he's emphasizing the meaningfulness of this game as he always does, but only to a certain extent, in that you don't want to distract guys and you don't want them, frankly, too fired up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, kind of business as usual from Jonathan Smith, I guess, in that regard.
But I think the players are a little extra fired up. There's a little extra motivation, as noted from, like I said, Damian Martinez's tweet today.
Yeah. Smith did say that Oregon State will need emotion and passion to win this game, and he's calling on Beaver Nation to provide that. So if you are one of the lucky few who has a ticket to this game, if you are a season ticket holder, or you bit the bullet and you spent hundreds of dollars on the secondary market, Jonathan Smith wants you loud. As I
want to see it louder than USC.
It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to top, because that was probably the loudest I've heard Reser in the Jonathan Smith era, even at reduced capacity. I also asked Jonathan Smith about the kicking game, which, we like to talk special teams on the damn podcast. All right. So I asked him about it because Oregon State went 1 for 3 at Arizona State. The Beavers are now 3 of 10 from 30 yards or further out. And frankly, at the college level, I mean, you see some of that, but being below average in kicking is something that will bite you, and certainly can in a close game like we expect this one to be. He said the guys are working at it, and that, quote, they need some balls to go through the uprights. I don't know. I don't know how you flip the script in 1 week of practice, but apparently they are trying.
Okay. Yeah. That's like stating the obvious there. Need some balls to go through the uprights.
Yeah. Speaking of Brandon Kipper, who we just highlighted, I know Angie and I will miss him dearly when he's gone, because he is such a wealth of knowledge, and always provides great insight when we interview him. But he was part of the interview crew this week on Tuesday, and I liked his quotes on what this game means, not only to him, but to the program, to the senior class, who he admitted has a losing record against Oregon. And so he said, for a guy like me, for our seniors, to go out on a high note with a W this week would be meaningful. So I like that he admitted that this game does mean just a little bit more to the guys like him.
Yeah. And I know, gosh, Kyrie Fisher's kind of, mentioned the same, those guys, they want to beat these guys. And while they say they're not looking ahead, they've been quietly looking at this little circled date in the calendar. So Ben Goldbranson also, wants to help get them their win and go out with a win. And just if you get a chance and you're not watching the Beaver Blitz videos, definitely do so, because it's fun to kind of get a glimpse of these players.
Since we're talking special teams, I have to throw this comment up on the if you're watching us live on YouTube here. Eric F in the chat drops this tidbit that I, in fact, kicked 7 field goals in one game and returned a punt to the 1 yard line before getting tackled by a lineman. Cannot confirm nor deny this.
When was this, like 7th, 4th grade football, 3rd grade football?
As someone who has never played an organized game of football in my life, I'm curious when this occurred, but clearly Eric F's sourcing is putting in some work on that tidbit.
Okay, is it true?
No, it's not even remotely true.
All right, I think
maybe
we go with
recess in like 3rd grade or something.
Okay, I think we go with it. I think we run with it.
Hey, I appreciate special teams. It's an underrated part of the game of football. We will not have any special teams keys in our keys to the game segment, but let's move on to that anyways. And we'll start with Angie's offensive key right now.
The key to special teams is get the ball through the upright. There
you go.
Boom. Okay.
There you go.
Keys to the game. Carter and I actually have the same. I'm not even gonna say similar. Offensive key to the game is that Beavers have to have a downfield passing attack. That's
comes back to Oregon's secondary, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is their biggest weakness. They have one of the best run defenses in the conference, in the country. Oregon State's going to need to go downfield.
I went a little bit further in saying that I think Ben Gulbranson has to have his best passing game yet, actually. I think he has the opportunity for it because this will be the weakest pass defense that he has played against. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think maybe Cal had a rough one. I can't remember. There was one defense he played against, and Washington too. But statistically speaking, Oregon's frankly is not good. Their run defense is very good though, and so I think you've got the opportunity for Ben to have his best game, and also the necessity for it. And so I think that's just obviously something to watch for. Another element of that is what Oregon's done on 3rd down, and frankly, what it hasn't done on 3rd down. Opponents are converting at a 49% clip, which is eerily similar to what Oregon State allowed on 3rd downs for about a 3-4 year stretch with Tim Tibesar at DC. And you remember what Oregon State's pass defense looked like in those years. That's pretty much exactly what Oregon's done. So, as somebody who's seen that kind of defense for 4 years, how much of a liability that can be. And so I think it's important for Oregon State that if the Beavers are going to move the ball, they need Ben Gulbranson to be efficient in early downs, but also to take advantage of some of that porous 3rd down defense. Go ahead and move to the defensive side, Angie.
Defense, I think you have to stop the Ducks rushing attack. They're going to try to run the ball. They're, especially with Bo Nix, a little hobbled. So Oregon State has to stop them. And they have one of the better running attacks. I mean, I think them and Oregon State are like kind of neck and neck with where they are running. I love yours, Carter, that, find ways to pressure Nix. The problem is Oregon State hasn't been able to pressure anybody. So with Oregon's O-line, I think that's going to be a tough challenge. That's why I went with stopping the run.
Yeah, so my full key is that Oregon State has to find a way to pressure Bo Nix without opening things up downfield, because I feel like the only way Oregon State's going to get pressure on the pocket and to potentially sack Nix, which has only been done 3 times this year, is to bring the house. It's those safety blitzes, it's those corner blitzes, it's Ryan Cooper Jr. on the edge as a nickel getting back there. That's, I think, the only way Oregon State can do it. But with Nix completing passes at a 72% rate, and with the talent they have outside, Chris Hudson, and a handful of other guys, name of their leading rusher is escaping me at the moment. You can't afford to go one-on-one all game and to have one safety back there. You need those guys back there because Oregon has a very good passing attack. And especially if Nix can't run it, he's going to rely on passing it. So, I think it's a tough matchup for Oregon State in that way, in that the Beavers really struggle to get pressure. And I think the only way to do it is by sacrificing your downfield defense. So I frankly, I don't see Oregon State getting much pressure on him, and I think that's going to cost the Beavers.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one.
All right, with it being rivalry week, we have a full slate of Pac-12 games to highlight, and we'll close this episode out like we always do with a look around the Pac-12. And if we have a minute or two at the end, we might hit on a couple of the questions that came in via the YouTube chat. But let's start with the action on Black Friday. We'll get things. We'll kick things off in the Pac-12 at noon Pacific on Friday with the Territorial Cup, where Arizona State is a 4-point underdog in Tucson.
I think that's pretty fair. I think Arizona's been playing a lot better, and ASU really not impressive.
Obviously, we saw that firsthand last week. I just don't think Arizona State's playing for much, and Arizona, they're not going bowling, but this is their senior day. It's at their house, and they remember Arizona State beating them by about 70 points not too long ago. So I like the Wildcats in that one. Moving to the state of California, the game that is referred to by some as the Bear Bowl, but doesn't have an official name. UCLA, a 10-point favorite in Berkeley at Cal, Friday, 1:30 p.m. on Fox.
That UCLA should roll in that one. And I'm not a huge UCLA fan, but I think that Cal's just has too many struggles.
Cal struggled against Stanford for much of that game before coming back to beat the Cardinal in the 125th playing of the big game. Then our game, Oregon, a 3-point favorite in Corvallis, 12:30 p.m. Pacific on ABC. ESPN Radio will also be in the house, so this is getting a ton of national coverage. Beavers and Ducks in the limelight. Angie, will save our predictions for this for BeaverBlitz staff picks, which will go live on the site on Friday. So let's move to the Rumble in the Rockies with
29.5-point favorite for Utah.
Notable, a spread in which Colorado is not a 30-point or greater underdog, which has been the case for, I think, about half the season.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. That game is 1 p.m. Pacific on Pac-12 Network.
Well, I did think Utah played the worst game that I've seen from them in a couple years. I think Cam Rising did not look like himself on last week against Oregon. I still think Utah puts up 50 on Colorado.
As soon as the game in Corvallis wraps up, USC will host Notre Dame. They will play for the Jewel Shillelagh once again at the Memorial Coliseum in Los Angeles. That is, again, also on ABC. USC, a 5.5-point favorite, and this is a huge spot for the Pac-12, man. I mean, huge. USC playing for a potential college football playoff berth cannot afford a letdown game against a Notre Dame team that very recently really took it to Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, this has to. I mean, USC has got to win this one to keep hopes alive for a couple teams hitting see if those New Year's Day bowls.
An important one for Oregon State fans to keep an eye on too. If the Beavers want to go to the Vegas Bowl or Holiday Bowl, they will need USC to make the playoff, and frankly, probably Oregon to make the Rose Bowl. They will also need Washington to beat Washington State in the Apple Cup in Pullman. The Huskies are a 2-point favorite as things stand right now. That's a 7:30 p.m. kickoff on ESPN. It's going to be frigid on the Palouse. I saw potentially some snow in the forecast. This feels very coin flippy to me.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think Penix is good, but Washington State, I don't know. I think in the Palouse, it's a coin flip.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch, no less. A very defensive team in Washington State going up against that passing offense. At Washington, I think that's got instant classic written all over it. Then the Pac-12 slate ends with a kind of a sleeper here. I mean, I will not be watching BYU at Stanford, but the Cougars are a 6.5-point favorite in that 8 p.m. kickoff on FS1.
And thank God Oregon is not an 8 p.m. kickoff.
Very glad. That's I guess for Oregon State fans, the silver lining in watching Oregon beat Utah last week was that that was probably the difference between a 12:30 on ABC and a 7:30 on ESPN. And sure enough, Oregon State got what it was hoping for there, or at least we did. We were hoping.
At least the media did. Yes.
Kind of sick and tired of these late kickoffs, but luckily back to back day games. Angie, it feels really good. Yeah. Anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No, it's Civil War weekend. It's glorious. Stick with BeaverBlitz. Remember, 75% off through Monday, Cyber Monday.
Best deal of the year. Seriously, do not miss this. It runs for almost a full week. But take advantage of it before you forget, because this kind of deal is not coming back for a while. So if you want access to all of our VIP content, if you want to get into the lodge and talk with other Oregon State fans, get some insight from us behind the paywall, it's the only way to do it. So take advantage while you got the opportunity.
Because this usually comes around right before the start of the season, and then Black Friday. That's it.
On that note, Angie, I'll see you on Saturday. We'll drive down to Corvallis and cover this thing. And then we'll be back on Sunday here on YouTube to recap it. Until then, you can follow her on Twitter at Angie Machado 1. You can follow me at Carter Bahns. And we will talk to you on Sunday for another episode of the Damn Podcast.